everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Lifting. This episode is being recorded on 3/29/25. This is a fascinating episode, folks. But before we get into even the specifics, I now open this circle within true benevolence and no conflicting agendas as of this moment in time. So, Joanna?
We are all one, and when one is harmed, all are harmed. When one is helped, all are helped. Therefore, in the name of who I am, and I am one with all there is, that only the highest good be done. We pray for you, your friends, your family, your loved ones, to let healing energies in. Let them love you, let them nourish you, and let them bring you to your highest good. We ask for benevolence now to come in with no conflicting agenda, so that we may have this conversation with their contribution in peace and with the knowledge that it is intended to be. And we ask for malevolent or mischievous beings that want to interfere to just be swept away right now, so that we can have this conversation in peace. And with that, and of course, great blessings that we always send your way, we say, so be it.
And so be it.
So today we went on a little adventure, and Chris always likes to kind of figure things out and likes to share that our little adventures that we go on with everyone here. And so that's what we're doing today. So interestingly enough, where we are in Virginia, of course, a little bit north of us is Williamsburg, Yorktown, different places that are pretty famous, of course, for the Revolutionary War and for Jamestown when the settlers first came in. That's, where we are, a little south, about an hour south of a lot of those places. So we like to go and visit them. We like to see the historic stuff. Well, across basically a little finger waterway, let's just say, and we actually, when we left there, had to take a ferry, a car ferry over to Williamsburg in Surrey County, is a place referred to as Bacon's Castle. And I knew this was kind of a historic place, a preservation place, but I'd never been there before. And it had come up to Chris's attention by someone that they had heard or went out there themselves and kind of felt that this place was still haunted. And so it was really a nice day today. Really best spring day we've had here. Just to let you know, the cherry blossoms are all in bloom here, and it's beautiful. And so we decided to take a drive out there to do that. It is an interesting story because this is a story that predates the Revolutionary War. This actually is a story, again, you have the Jamestown settlement happening, and then you have what grew from that, and people deciding to come over from the United Kingdom and to actually then try to make a home here, to actually then establish trade and do different things like that, to then farm, crop. Tobacco was a huge crop during this time frame. And what ended up happening in this particular interesting time frame was someone who saved up enough wealth, let's say, that they were able to come over here, and they had definite ideas of wanting to be involved with the trade industry, with the tobacco industry and growing, and with other things, and was actually a pretty wealthy person who came over into this area. Now, if you think about just over land, let's say, he's about 25 miles at the most from Jamestown, where that initial settlement is. But again, you still have to cross a body of water, you know what I mean, to get there. And so, but this particular gentleman, again, being wealthy, had an idea of when he came over, what was I going to get? What was this, the land I was going to try and get, and what was my home going to be like? And so this particular home is one of the first true brick built type homes. And it was a very, of course, fancy home. It was probably, I think in total, when the whole thing was done, maybe 5,000 square feet, but I don't think it necessarily started out that big. But again, this was a very opulent, basically considered, of course, a mansion, and was brick. It had a basement and 3 other floors. The last floor being more of an attic space, but it had, again, 2 main living areas. The bottom floor actually was more how they did it in Europe and different places where they initially had, that's where our kitchen is, that's where baking is done, whatever,
And
more
it
in
ended
the
up turning,
basement.
it ended up turning into an oven in Virginia summers, so they had to put one outside.
Yeah. And so, and then you have kind of the main opulent flooring area where guests and different people came into. You had another area which was kind of the bedrooms of the people that were there. And then the top floor happened to be more of an attic space, but as this place grew, and they did have slaves on the property, and that grew, a lot of the persons that were working in the home and or were some of their crops where they were then making it into linen and spinning it or whatever, they were up in that very last floor, which had 3 different little rooms, but they were sleeping there, they were working there. Their families were there with them in those room areas. So the 2 in between sandwich rooms are the ones where the family. So the family that actually did this, the last name is Allen. But again, this is called Bacon's Castle. And the Allen family actually had this property for quite a long time, passing it down to generations. But it's a very, very interesting story why it's referred to as Bacon Castle. And so again, the most interesting thing, again, we're talking the 1600s. So if you can think about it from Jamestown, and then you think about the progression and someone very wealthy coming over, ready, again, to build a nice, pretty brick house. And I don't know, if we want them to see the photograph of the.
Oh, yes, I will share a screen
Yeah,
here.
just show the photograph of Bacon's Castle. So this is Bacon's Castle, and it looks like this is a picture they shot from the back side of the house, not the front side. But I think, Chris, if you take if you scroll it back down and take the cursor, no, scroll back up, please, and take the cursor and put it right there. That's kind of the edge where what's closest to us is the oldest. Am I saying that right? Is the oldest part of the home that was put together. And when you actually, and I'm hoping with what we filmed, you'll see some of that brick looks a lot older and everything. The other section was kind of put on in the 1800s. But again, this style with, all these chimneys. And again, what you're seeing is, you see the main floor, and the second floor, and up right beside there you can see the attic kind of floor window. And then there is a kind of, I don't think we see it here, but there are kind of, if you go below, the picture doesn't do this, but below there's kind of a half window, and then that's the 4th floor, the basement area. But the story is so interesting. And again, part of the reason that we went here is because someone wanted to know our feelings of what we thought about it. Did we think it was, had any haunting? So we went there, and we're going to share that with you. I'm not sure if you want me to say a little bit more about the history of it, and then show what you did.
Yes. We're going to show clips, including a ghost box session of what was done there.
And you're sharing screen?
Yes.
Yeah. So this kind of is nice. It gives a little bit about the history. Again, for the Allen family, and look at the date, 1665. So it was first known as it's saying, the Allen's brick house. And it's really an interesting story because at that time, the governor of Virginia we have that up on the other, unless you got rid of it,
No, here we are.
is William Berkeley. He happens to be the governor of Virginia. So things were moving along in Virginia. Everything was fine. What happened, what was really interesting is when someone else made their trek to the United States and their last name happens to be Nathaniel Bacon. Now, the one thing is that he kind of was an interesting character in history from what we were told and what we know. It'll be interesting for when we have our contribution part of this to see if anything is other than what it appears.
And I do want to also bring up, I believe he is related to Sir Francis Bacon. I will bring this up as well. I forgot to do this as well. Oh, interesting. I said it and it already came up in the search parameters.
So again, now if there is a relationship, then it is a not a close cousin. It's like distant, but there is thought there could be a family. There could be some family ties, but it's not close. It would be distant relatives that just have the same last name.
And then some people believe that Shakespeare and him were the same. I'm gonna just put that in real fast. Here. And you see the years on here. April 23rd, born April 23rd, 1564. Died April 23rd, 1616. Sir Francis Bacon. You see how the times kind of intersect each other a little bit, but even though those pictures don't really look completely alike, but some people also they see this the bit of clothing
Right.
out there.
And so this is not a story about Shakespeare or Francis Bacon, but we're just saying people will normally think of that name Francis Bacon, and if there is a relationship, it is a distant relative.
Yeah.
But what Nathaniel Bacon, who he was related to, was the governor, Sir William Berkeley's wife. So there was a relationship there. So when he came here to the area, there is rumor that he was running from things that he had done over there, and he was running away from it, maybe to start to have a new beginning. But really, the story he sounds like a very interesting character who must have some charisma, to get people wound up around him. But really, some of the things that, he got himself involved in, he got passionately involved in and caused, an uprising, basically.
Well, yeah, Nathaniel Bacon actually hated Native Americans. He thought they were a menace, like what was said here. Let me see. Basically, cause of the rebellion. The rebellion was sparked by conflicts with Native Americans and Governor Berkeley's perceived inactions and policies that favored the wealthy planters.
So what was happening then is that during that time,
you see, this is his wife. I'll say real quick, the woman you mentioned before,
right.
Frances Culpeper Stevens Berkeley, also known as Lady Frances Berkeley.
Right, and she
born. Was born in 1634 and arrived in Virginia with her parents in 1650. So.
Right. So she's the one that's related to Nathaniel Bacon. So when he came over here, and again, apparently some of the historical things that were going on, you got to remember there wasn't a lot going on much further, into Virginia. This is the time frame we're talking, that growth going up north and going south and going out west. It was just, parts of that was in the infancy or hadn't even begun yet. So, but what it appeared is that slavery was happening, but indentured servitude was happening. And that's a big deal because people seem to want to forget about that. They think that, let's call being in that situation was only a black person. But the indentured servitude has
slaves and servants of all kinds.
Long history over in Europe when you look into that.
And people like to blame whites for a lot of this, but blacks were selling people to blacks, whites were selling whites, either indentured servitude, slavery of all kinds, Europe, Africa, all Asia, they were selling Chinese to
all
all of them.
over the place.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing about it is that what was happening is there were times that either slaves were being freed or indentured servitude was up, let's say, for people. And what would happen is that those people would tend to move more west, okay? And they may be even, a lot of times with the adventures of going out there, you would maybe be given land, 5 acres or so, be given land, or more than that. It seemed to be that if you were more on the wealthy side, you got a bigger piece of the pie. If you were maybe someone like this, or a regular person who was done with their servitude or a freed slave, that you would maybe get a very small piece of the pie comparatively. And at that point, again, people had to farm. People had to do things. They had to bring in their food supply, bring in the cotton that they wanted to make clothing or linen with. So all of the stuff that they wanted to create more than just a life in their little home. If they wanted to branch out and become something, you oftentimes needed more land to be able to do these things. So what was happening, and also at that time, freed slaves and the indentured servitude type people that were freed really were not in any sort of voting class, okay? So what first happened with Nathaniel Bacon is that there would be frustrations that would happen between the groups that were, not, let's just say, not treated as well as wealthy, and they would themselves get angry, go in, rob, loot, do whatever, to get whatever they needed, I guess, or just they were angry that they didn't feel that their freedom, let's say, was totally being honored in a way that it was for people who had more wealth. And again, they obviously weren't considered a class that could vote at that time. So one of the things that, Nathaniel Bacon saw this, didn't like this, brought it up to his aunt, was his uncle would listen to him, and apparently so. But knowing that that was not the class that would vote him or support him, he really just kind of let it be. And things like that began to really anger Nathaniel Bacon. Also, of course, the more further out west you start to go from, the established places, then you may run into indigenous Indians and indigenous people. There could be conflicts, and all of this was happening. So that's where he also took up the championship of wanting to run all of the indigenous people out of the state of Virginia, specifically for a class population that he felt was being underserved, let's just say. And so the story goes that, I guess I'm assuming, with other sympathizers of his cause, as well as maybe some of those people that were in that underserved class, they kind of weren't being listened to. And so let's just say an uprising began. And they were trying to cause trouble to get their concerns and to get their way. So what ended up happening is that the Allen's home, which was so unique in the area, and was so opulent comparatively to these little mud-like huts, I guess you would want to say, that others were living in, that during that time frame, and it was about an uprising that lasted for they think about 30 years, but for like a 3-month period, what happened is that about 70 of those insurgents, part of, Bacon's rebellion, let's call it, went and took over that property. And while they were there for those 3 months, it really was something else. They really just looted the holy heck out of it, ate, got what they could get. Again, and that farm had everything. It had fruit trees, It was able to make, alcohol, wines because of the fruit trees they had. They had a lot of things going on there, and these people just came in and plundered it, basically. Most of the family escaped during that time and then ended up being able to come back to their home once it was all over, except for, unfortunately, a grandmother who wasn't well. But she survived all of that too. So they came in and they just plundered it. By the time it was over, they set the fields on fire. It just was apparently a big mess.
And also the grandmother was left there. That was Arthur Allen's second's grandmother, and came back. I believe it was grandmother, I believe. Yeah.
I thought it was a grandmother.
Grandma came back and she wanted to brain him for leaving.
Right, but at the time, I think they didn't, they were caught between a rock and a hard place, because they went to the Eastern Shore, which is a little bit of a trek, and I think they honestly thought no one would harm her, number one, no one would ask her to leave, number two, and she wouldn't have made it. So I don't think it was to be mean, but unfortunately, they did tell her to leave. So I don't know where she went. I don't know exactly that part of the story, but she survived it all with everyone, and then they were reunited back. Now, after that occurred again, that farming and that everything that was done still expanded. That Allen family had that going on until I think it may have been close to the mid 1800s. So for almost almost 200 years, that family was there, generation after generation.
Until it hit Arthur Allen III, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think what it is that there weren't like tons of slaves there in the beginning, but it grew. As the farm grew, as things grew, they brought more slaves in. So there were, let's just say, around the home, in the backyard back, there were slave quarters. There were different things that were needed for what was going on. They do happen to have one slave quarter that is standing that you can just take a look at real quick. But anyway, and then what happened is that it went there were a total of 3 different families that owned this place, and then it went from, once the Civil War occurred and the slavery was abolished, it went to more of a sharecropping, that they were able to bring people in that way, to do it in that kind of way, and it ended up still being successful that way for a while. And then just slowly that kind of business was going away, and the last family members who had no children to leave it to, they passed away. And what ended up happening is that it was bought by the Virginia Preservation Society, because of it being such one of the first ever brick kind of mansions that just happened in the United States, period. So, it's been there a long time, was there, again, like I said, since the 1600s. And so again, people are curious, is it really haunted or anything? So,
and the TV show Ghost Hunters apparently was out there as well at one point, and they determined that there were things there. But the thing of it is, though, we went up into the upper floor.
Why don't we show them things first, and then we'll talk about it.
Okay. Yeah, at this point, we now take a break here and go over to the footage that we captured at Bacon's Castle. Okay, we're here at Bacon's Castle. Before we do the tour or anything like that, and came here at the suggestion of our friend Mary, who wanted to see what we felt about this place. And you see it here. I believe this was it Sir Francis Bacon's brother, I believe, owned this. So, take the tour and find out for certain. But all in all, it's peaceful, but there are some dense spots. But I'll do the ghost box a little later, but it's under construction here. But see, this is what the land looks like out this way. took a minute to get here too. So, all right. Walk over here. I'll show you a little bit more of the ground. A little windy, so hopefully that's not hitting the mic for all of you. Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of denseness, but it's not like it's kind of similar to Monticello in that way, where there's dense pockets and there's the lighter ones. But in fact, on the way here, there were denser pockets towards more of the populated areas than there were here. So, go back to the plaque here. Okay. Was designated a historical site or national landmark under the provisions of Historic Sites Act, August 21st, 1935. This site possesses exceptional value in commemorating and illustrating the history of the United States. U.S. Department of Interior, National Park Service, 1963. So, all right. I'll go around this side and show a little bit of it out here.
It's obviously newer section.
Yeah, this is
the older section.
that's the older section. They've renovated it. You can tell since then. You can tell where there's new bricks put in. They eventually fade to the coloring of the original in time. They did that to the Parthenon as well, where they're renovating it with new marble in places. So, all right. All right, I think I'm going to end this recording here because we will move on from this part. So, it is 1:24 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Saturday, March 29th, 2025. Thank you. All right, we got done with the tour a little bit ago. Found out I was slightly incorrect, as I surmised about Nathaniel Bacon. He is related to Sir Francis Bacon by multiple cousinship, though. So we got done with this, and I thought it was interesting when we were on the top floor up there. You see the blue scaffolding, and up here, the slave quarters are at the highest point in the attic area, where it peaks, where they would make all the products like fabrics and such up there. And surprisingly, ultimately enough, I only detected one ghost on this property. So,
Where did you detect it? Because I thought it was all the way upstairs.
yes, there was a black slave up there.
Yeah. And it was weird because I was drawn before he said that that child was sleeping in that thing. The first room we went on.
Yeah, there was a
puppy, and I'm like, I felt like that's where it was coming.
Yeah,
from.
there was a little bed for a child up there, and then there was also a textile wheel up there, and it was in the room with the textile wheel or the spinning wheel where the black slave is.
But
So
some of the children apparently they had like little cutouts that would give them a little bit more attic space, and they technically would sleep in there. From what he was saying, I thought that was interesting. But that's the only area that I thought. Too.
yeah, only one area with one ghost in there, and I did not pass her on. Hang on, actually, yeah. All right. Also, I thought it was unusual that Nathaniel Bacon's energy was not here, and we found out he never set foot on the property. It was named for him because his rebellion showed up here. And it turns out that the reason he rebelled is because the governor at the time would not let him exterminate Native Americans. But yet he felt for the black slaves, though, which this actually was a bit of a conundrum. But he was there about his people were here for 3 months and trashed it. And the true owner, Arthur Allen II, had all of his products trashed, his tobacco trashed and everything. So I found that interesting. And I also find it interesting that I came to find out that Sir Francis Bacon is actually the being we knew as Thomas. So, because that was Shakespeare. There's many people that have surmised that that's who that actually was. And we went by a passage through Oak Island. There's some history that has to do with Sir Francis Bacon and Oak Island. And then, don't quote me on that part of it, but then Nathaniel Bacon, they don't completely know if he was by blood or by marriage. It's unknown, but he carries the name. And the fact that there was a relative of Thomas's that would do this trashing, it kind of almost doesn't surprise me. But this is the land surrounding in the back of it. I will go around front, grab my ghost box in a little bit here. And also, we got to find out who the name of that slave was, but...
Well, I know, but I think one of these was one of the original places where some of the slaves, the outdoor slaves.
Yeah, the outdoor slaves stayed out here, and the energy is kind of crappy over in there. Always, just like in Monticello, always where the slaves were kept, the energy is absolutely god freaking awful. And you can even feel it in your throat out here. So, especially over this way where you see the open 3 doors over there, off this way, it's pretty bad over here. I get the feeling somebody was hung or killed back here because my throat's tightening up. But that could be residual too. But some of the trees that were here then aren't now. But it's mainly off this direction here. And I find that interesting. Okay.
Let me see where 110 is. There's one. Where are we standing now? I'm confused.
Okay. We'll have to go back in and look at the name of that.
Oh,
that
okay.
Okay. You want to go over this way?
Yeah, it may be this house right where they're standing.
Yeah, this one over there with the 3 over here, and this one with the 1 here. And some of the, it's basically a puzzle they put together over the centuries. Some were 1700s, others were 1800s. All right, here we are. This is a slave and tenant house here, or one of the areas. And there is a fairly large bee out here. Okay. 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 Okay, where this says here, I was reading it first. Okay, this building is the last remaining slave quarter at Bacon's Castle, first built in 1829 under the direction of the Koch family. This slave quarter was significantly smaller than what you currently see, having a single entry door and a porch in 1834. There were 80 slaves working the property, okay, some of whom were probably housed in this building in the mid-19th century. Almost 20 such structures would have existed on the site. By 1849, the structure was enlarged to the size you see today. Once slavery was abolished in 1865, the former slave quarters were converted into houses for tenant farmers. Sorry, there's a fairly large bee out here. many, including this one, remained in use through the mid-20th century. The house was wired for electricity, and a small kitchen was added to the back of the building. Although 3 or 4 families would have lived here prior to the Civil War, the interior was modified to accommodate 1 or 2 families after the war. The kitchen was removed in the 1990s, returning to the building closer to its antebellum appearance. So, we will go in here. Alright. We could not film in the main house. They would not allow it, but there'll be pictures on my Facebook. Alright. Alright. And there's that large hornet of some kind again.
Yeah, it looks like a carpenter, trapped carpenter bee.
Let's do it. I can't open the window up. There's 2 of them right there, actually. And a wasp. Okay. So, 4 things gonna get trapped in here, but okay. But, alright. Oop. Okay. Yep, that is definitely a carpenter bee. Okay. So, yeah, this is the inside of this room. And alright. Okay. Do not sting me. Okay. Alright, this is for the house from the back end here. And we will go back inside and look for that name of that person. I'll probably recognize it when I see it. So, on this recording here, it is 2:55 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Saturday, March 29th, 2025. Thank you. Okay, we're actually going back to this 3-doored building back here. And it is actually getting denser the further back you get back here. Even my shoulders hurting going back here, so you can kind of feel it in your jaw a little bit. And the chest here. So this is that back area. So and 1701 barn. Okay. Alright. This barn is traditionally thought to have been constructed in 1701 by Major Arthur Allen II. It is also the oldest surviving outbuilding at Bacon's Castle and one of the oldest in Virginia. An inventory of Major Allen's belongings taken at the time of his death in 1711 indicates that the property was extensively farmed at that time and the barn would have been in frequent use. The structural system of the barn, which is now partially exposed, shows how beams were joined to make a strong frame without the extensive use of nails. Prior to the invention of mechanized tools, beams were shaped by hand using a saw or an adze that left the smooth surface of the beam with slight peaks and depressions. In the 1844 survey map of Bacon's Castle, shown to the left, the smokehouse has been circled in red. At the time, many of the buildings currently on site had not yet been constructed. The smokehouse is a remnant of the first phase of outbuilding construction. Okay. Okay. There we go. This seems to be the building that's the densest, let's say. You wouldn't think of it. I almost feel like somebody was like hung or something, you know, but okay, bees. Okay. Okay, carpenter bee. Okay. Ah, a lot of carpenter bees out here.
Yeah.
But Yeah, that one was mad. Okay. I could see that's a perfect environment for him, but yeah, this seems to be, yeah, it's here. And of course, not everything survives history. Granted, when they cleared Bacon's rebellion out of here, obviously there was fighting going on. They trashed it. They were pretty horrible people. So I could see why there would be negativity here. But at the same time, he favored getting rid of the Native Americans. This would support something like that if he tried something like that, or his people tried something like that. They were the mentality. So
right. So, but originally the Bacon's Castle, the original people that owned it came from England. They were here in the 1600s, late part. That portion of the house that we see furthest over to the right, the bigger portion, is the original part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that one there.
They had acres, hundreds of acres of tobacco and different things. They eventually started bringing on slaves, and I think by the Civil War, I think between the 1700s, sometime in the Civil Wars, when they started bringing slaves in, and they may have had, I think they said maybe up to 80 or so. These weren't that was not the only quarters. It's just the only standing quarters. Yeah. There was dozens of buildings through here. Yeah. So, but yeah, it is something.
Yeah, I just feel somebody was murdered. It was more than likely a Native American. It's somebody of darker skin. So yeah.
Or, it's where discipline occurred.
Discipline. I'm thinking it was more, discipline.
I don't know. I mean, it just feels.
That's the really
away from the house. You know what I mean?
Oh, bees. All right. I think one got me. But anyway, but yeah, this is where this happened. That's what this feels like.
You could see through the tree line. All the property, as far as the eye could see, is what was owned by these folks, and it was. They had a large contingent of people.
Tobacco, grapes, all what they grew out here. Yeah.
They grew all kinds of things. They had a lot of trees. They had orchards, and everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, all right, we will go back in the house. Look for. I feel I'll know who that was in the upper floor there. There's only so many listed. It was interesting on the way in. For some reason, I didn't look at that particular part of the description of the black people that were here. Something, my eyes avoided it. So there's something to that.
But really, for the most part, this property is nice.
It's nice. It's like how Monticello was. For the most part, it was nice. And then where the slaves were, or where there was disciplinary action of some kind, or upheaval, or riot type thing, anything that happened, it was bad. Mm-hmm. But I mean, you could tell that the rebels added their own kind of flavor to the land when they were here. They were essentially land pirates. So, not the cool kind either. But with this, it's an interesting property overall. That back there, I believe, was residual. This one, however, in that upper floor was not residual. That was an interactive. So, it's interesting. So, all right, I'm gonna end this recording right here. It is 3:02 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Saturday, March 29th, 2025. Thank you. Okay, all right, we were outside the front of Bacon's Castle, and I looked on the list of black residents. And this is interesting because I was hearing the Doctor Who music in my head as I was going along. Obviously, somebody was transmitting me that for a reason, knowing I would know the name reference. There's a character in Doctor Who by the name of Martha Jones. And there was a figure that in 1864 also was named Martha Jones. Her and former slaves left here in 1864. That means they would have worked up there. So, her and her, I believe her other family members and her sister, I believe. So, anybody from here want to correct me, please go ahead. But I am going to utilize the ghost box. And there'll be a couple things I ask. One is Nathaniel Bacon wandering the property, which I don't believe he is, but if he pops in and out. Two, what did Arthur Allen II think of what happened, and what did he do after he returned and got control of the property again? And also the fact that he left his poor mother here, we found out. He knew the rebels wouldn't mistreat them, but they kicked her out anyway, and she wanted to brain him. That was one of the worst but funnier stories. And 3, this is more back to Nathaniel. In your afterlife, or if you're a ghostly existence, do you have any contact with your ancestor and or relative Sir Francis Bacon, which, by the by, is also Thomas and Shakespeare, if you go with some of our lifting material of the Lifting's Guide to Galactic History, the Immortals of History. So, many people believe that Bacon and William Shakespeare were one and the same. So, Sir Francis Bacon and William Shakespeare. If you look at the resemblance, it's uncanny as well. So, at the very least, family. So, I will turn this on.
Xbox. Scanning. SM.
Exclusive.
Is Martha still here?
Wait, pause.
You've got a voice for much bigger.
I heard my name. Who was that? What caused my stomach to turn when we got here? Most importantly, was that Martha in the upper room that talked to me. And I loathe to do this, but true benevolence with no conflicting agendas at this moment in time. If Thomas is relation and comes here, does he have any words? After that, from our benevolent allies. I heard that's impossible. Who was that? You want And Isaac, what relation do you have to the Bacons and also to Sir Francis being Thomas being Shakespeare? By people, Tuatha, Dryden's people, or what? Final words from our allies and friends. Thank you. All right. The reason I asked that Thomas question is because I sensed his energy out here. So I will just do one more. Turn it back on. I know it's unorthodox that I do this, but one more. Am I correct in that assessment? Yes or no?
S-Box. Scanning. FM.
And did negativity cause my stomach issues? Oh, I got it. All right, thank you. All right, I think we've done enough damage for today. So, all right. Set this down a minute. Yeah, it's actually fairly peaceful, but I know his energy when I see it. And when we were at Spirit Lake, we sensed him there too. And in a restaurant we went to with Chad Wagner, I also sensed his presence there when we were outside of Wilmington. So, not summoning him. No, I revoke any perceived tacit permissions and invitations to him at this moment in time. But I also trust my intuition. So I will leave this here. With this, you will see other materials. We're actually turning this into a lifting episode. So I'm now closing this ghost box circle as of this moment in time, and the circle in general. It is 3:17 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Saturday. No, it's 3:18 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Closing the ghost box circle at 3:18 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Saturday, March 29th, 2025. Thank you. Oh, and it was 919 when that popped up as well. So closing ghost box circle at 3:18 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Saturday, March 29th, 2025. Thank you. We're leaving Bacon's Castle, and I do want to say I left pizza shungite a crook of a tree underneath. I won't say which one, because there's hundreds of them here. But I also heard Faye saying thank you for the shungite offering when I did that here. So obviously they felt it was needed and wanted. So it's about that big, but yeah. Since they rake for rocks and all this other stuff out here quite often and clean it up quite often, they upkeep it. You can see here and here. So we're now leaving Bacon's Castle completely. Joanna, want to say anything?
No. Sorry.
Okay, bye. Okay. It is 3:21 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Saturday, March 29th, 2025. Thank you. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. Like I was saying before, though, yeah, Ghost Hunters was out there. They determined there were ghosts there. Jason Hawes's group's fantastic when it comes to this, but at the same time, I went there, found one ghost there. There was some residual off in the slave quarters and also in other areas.
The barn.
And the barn, rather,
barn, yeah.
where I felt somebody had been either tortured or died over there. And I'm thinking Bacon himself, not Bacon himself, but his people more than likely did this because he more than likely shared his views. But it was the one by the name of Martha Jones that was up in the upper floor. I came to find out it was 1864. Her and her family left Bacon Castle. And I will put all the photographs that I took at Bacon Castle on my Facebook, facebook.com/Christopher.s.Jacobs. So I will put them over there. If people want to see that, I'm not going to stick them in the video. There's too many of them. So with that said, though, that was literally the only ghost that I saw there, we went up to the top, standing next to the spinning wheel you see in one of the pictures. This is where I saw her phase in and phase out slightly quickly, looking over at me. And she said something really odd. It was more like you're wrong, or uh, it wasn't the word sick she was using. And she had an accent, so I couldn't completely catch it, but it was more like you're wrong about, and then that's really all I caught. And then I moved her on. But she seemed to literally be the only ghost. Why, when she left, she came back, I don't really know. Maybe we'll find that out here in a little bit. But she was literally the only ghost. It reminded me so much of Monticello in ways, because anywhere you saw, like in Monticello, anywhere you saw where the slaves were kept, that's where the energy was denser. And it was really no different with Bacon's Castle. Anywhere there was a slave kept, or somebody in servitude constantly like that, there were dense pockets. But I also have to say, like Monticello, there were light parts. So it really wasn't that bad. It's not like when we went to Gettysburg or parts of Salem or anything like that. It's not near on that level, or Boston, by the Boston Massacre, not anything like that. And so I highly recommend seeing it at least once, going to the site.
Just so you can appreciate really how old it is for us
Monticello
in
too.
in the United States. I mean, again, this was something that was built in the 1600s. And again, we didn't have a really big foothold here, at that time. So it was really very interesting to see that and what they had done. But again, this was done by somebody that, again, unless I'm told the story is completely wrong, this was done by somebody who I think brought a lot of stuff, maybe not bring it with him, but had the means to, be able to come over and plop themselves here and have this stuff built. Most, let's just say, regular people wouldn't have been able to do anything like that. So it is interesting. I am curious what, is going to be said here.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I have an itch there. So let's see. And I know, as I said, you heard me say in some of those little recordings where I know that Shakespeare was that being we talked to named Thomas, also known as Dryden, and I know him and Isaac are related. And so by blood. But I also noticed something, I will say, with Nathaniel Bacon and also Sir Francis Bacon. Basically, I'm more related to Thomas by how much, say, Nathaniel would be to Sir Francis. So that's how far apart these generations
Oh, these
are.
lines are, yeah. of
Yeah,
course.
there's
They're-
cousinships there.
You know.
At first, when I initially thought they were maybe nephew, one was nephew, one was brother, I had heard that from someone else. When we got it from the actual historian that were there, we're like, okay. And the tour guide were like, okay, this makes more sense because the time spans. So the way they said it. So they're only speculating. The tour guide said, it was a good question. It's not completely proven if it was by marriage or by cousinship of some sort. So it hasn't been completely proven yet. They're close to doing it, but that was basically it. And so it really wasn't, I guess, a priority to explore that part. But it's just more of a curious question they'll get to later. All right. I would assume it's Isaac because you're related possibly to Sir Francis Bacon. So,
But again, this isn't about him.
no, it's not about him. It's about Bacon's castle, of which he just happens to share the name, the last name. So, Isaac, okay. When we were talking about Governor Berkeley, I heard a voice in the background saying, "You call me sir," and then you said sir. So I just heard that when you said that earlier. So I thought that was funny. Every now and again, I will catch a whiff of that, something like that too. Obviously, Governor Berkeley was not there, and neither was Nathaniel. So. I know Isaac because they're dead. I understand that point. I think we all get that point.
Well, we didn't say just at the ending what happened to Bacon. So what actually happened to him? He was still off with his little group of marauders, supposedly, fighting Indians, fighting whatever, and he ended up dying of typhoid and dysentery during some of
those misadventures,
those
because
adventures that he was on trying to get rid of the Indians.
the Governor Berkeley and Governor Berkeley and the rest of them didn't condone genocide of the Indians. So he went off on his own and started killing a bunch of them to protect his assets. And over in England, he was guilty of scandals and all this other stuff.
Yeah,
So
I
he
know.
moved here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So not a very good person. So
No, well, I don't think he had many assets here. I think
No.
he didn't really acquire them.
no, he just made you think that he did. So a flim flam or a flim flam artist or a shyster. So Isaac. Okay. Benevolent Isaac, please. You are upset. All right. Hang on. There's some interference here. Benevolent Isaac only, please, if you don't mind. Yes, there was some butthurtedness there for a moment from some of the peanut gallery that was listening in as you were talking at Bacon's Castle. And just for a side note, are those two related? Yes, but by about this much. Just barely. Am I related? Barely. So just a little bit. Just like basically saying like you two are Native American, which of course you're not, even a little bit. That's like saying you're both Neanderthals. So it's essentially the difference. But there in Bacon's Castle, the rebellion, excuse, can I give a moment? Sorry, interference from somebody who is extremely annoying. So, with this said, at Bacon Castle during the rebellion, yes, this was the, how can I put it, vestigial of hatred and intolerance that was in some parts of England at that time. This person was an elitist that thought because he could do it, he should do it. Shyster, you would call him a flim-flam artist, as he said, an all-around asshole. And at first, the governor of him got along, as this history said. What you don't know is, in your own life, when you have some annoying pain in the ass that will not stop showing up to public meetings, won't stop showing up to public get-togethers to the point where everybody looks around and goes, oh crap, it's that guy. It's that type of relationship. This is the type of thing that happened when he was around. And you're picking up a little on him talking about being annoying. Okay. Is he related to the Thomas? Okay, well, I'll give him that one, but not as important at this time. Stop it. Okay. Now, with this, in that time when he was attempting to get his rebellion going, he had very, let's just say, caring thoughts towards the slaves and the indentured servitude, especially the white ones, and also the black ones. But when it came to Native Americans, he felt like they were behind the times, like that the people that were civilized were more evolved, and felt that they were above them. Even though others in those elitist circles thought similarly, they weren't condoning genocide at all, like your tour guide said. So when they saw he was the more extreme than they were, they're like, whoa, no, we won't go that far. We'll contain him somewhere, but we won't, do that. Well, then he took over Arthur Allen II's house And, or at least his people did, while he went off marauding in the woods. His people was essentially a band of pirates, just land pirates, mercenaries, marauders, things of that nature, or people of that nature, if you can call them that to an extent. They literally were they turned it into a frat house, essentially like the Tortuga of the landscape, where they were trying to set it up as their stronghold. They truly thought that they were going to take over one of the local governments and overthrow everything. Bacon actually believed he was going to overthrow everything, that he had had that much influence. He even thought this in his mind. He was megalomaniacal, but he had no resources. So, with that said, when his people took it over, they didn't plan this very well. They just happened upon it. And they held up and turned it into the castle. They're like, this is our castle. And of course, you know how the name stuck. But when Alan created the house, they were like they said in the tour, wanting to mimic England. They didn't know the landscape here. Landscape, weather, all the patterns, everything's different. Like you saw in the movie with Vikings that came over to conquer the Native Americans. It was too wet and muggy over here. They were meant for ice. This, even though that was the history was partially false in that movie, was called Pathfinder: Legend of the Ghost Warrior. That was mostly crap. They put in there. It was more Russell Means' opinion that was in that Native American opinion. But in this, towards whites, but in this, think that, but Bacon was that towards Native Americans. Now, did your boy that you spotted in Raleigh years ago, did he frequent that place? Not really. He was off doing his own plundering somewhere. Same attitude, I might say, but off plundering somewhere. But for context, she spotted Thomas in Raleigh, and he heard him on the phone saying, "Oops, I had the wrong person," and he was artsy fartsy looking. That dork. I'm just saying, and I say dork in the truest sense. But well, he was off doing his pillage and plundering. He was more into piracy at that time, actually, exploration and piracy. Kind of like a Blackbeard-ish type person. You can actually look him up, and he's actually a minor pirate in the area of the world earlier on. But with Bacon, uh, he was the epitome of what you would call elitist. Now, was he an offshoot of Cabal lineage? Yes, I will say, because it's something that dear darling Thomas started his own lines and such. Some of that got integrated into Cabal lines, and some of it got integrated into royalty, and there you have it. Even though he was the person that was around King Henry VIII as his advisor, and we know how that bit of wonderful history went. He was more like the court wizard, and you know how that went. But murder and mayhem, let's just put it that way.
Which continued with this Bacon.
Bacon.
I guess it's part of their blood.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Some of that murder and mayhem tendencies can pass through to the generations. Now, I'm not saying Thomas wasn't brilliant for all the stuff he wrote. Beautiful works. But he loved comedy and tragedy, I tell you, because some of his lineage turned into real pigs. Get it, Bacon? So with this, it's more like one of those tragedies, and comedy tragedies was playing out. The shyster that figured, oh, I'm going to make it big over in the colonies. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to change the world here. No, the Gardner family had it a little bit before you did, dipshit. But, and I say this because I know he can hear me, but both of them can actually hear me. But with this, he had those thoughts of grandeur, and look what happened to him. Died in a swamp, shitting himself to death. I don't think it went very well for him. So, and that's exactly what happened too.
Well, that's what happens with those diseases, sorry to say.
Yeah. And guess what? What do you think he was playing out here? Earlier today, worst stomach pains he's ever felt? What do you think Bacon went through? He died of shitting himself to death. Literally. And he felt like he was dying, had the worst stomach pains ever as soon as you cross the threshold into Bacon's castle. This is what Sir Dipshit there actually died from. Dysentery tends to do this. It's literally like you were floating up to your eyeballs and crap. So, this is exactly what happened to him, and it couldn't have happened to a better guy, I might add. I was mad when I came through because I was mad at that dipshit. Because this was empathic transference to the extreme. Already a bit of a thing going on, but enhanced by dipshit's ability to shit himself to death. So, that was his talent in life. He shit himself to death. So, and I will keep saying this because he's furious and in the corner somewhere. And he's a bit of a relative and I can kick him in the nuts. And he's also a ghost that I'm actually going to take care of this real fast. Now he's not. But if you could see him, he was a short little toad, about maybe 5'3". The history books kind of fuzzed it a little bit. And he had kind of a Napoleon complex a little bit. The history books will show that he's a little taller, but he kind of had to do with that a little bit, I must say. But I will go into questions now.
Well, again, I think it's interesting for people to go see because the way they have that house laid out is there's the what were the sleeping quarters of the people where the ceiling is like it was, right? And and then you get to see other parts of the house where they were more modernized into the 1800 looks of what they thought was fashionable then. But it is an interesting thing of seeing the different layers of, because this place is really that old. So.
It's really no different than any other historical site where the new is built on the old, like from antiquity, from the monolithic to the Roman to the medieval. This is no different from the 1500s, 16, 17, 1800s. And even into the 1900s. And now they're still rebuilding and adding new onto it. You even saw something on the Parthenon recently, as he mentioned also in the recording earlier, that they put new bits of marble to repair where the explosion from the Turks took place in their gunpowder magazine. Yes, it appears because it's white, as it hasn't faded to age with the patina. The same goes with Bacon's Castle. You're seeing some of the newer brick with a shinier, with lack of patina on it, but with the weather and the elements always win. So they will all match in time. This is why they are restoring it the way they are, but they are finding new layers underneath. Even in a simple house like that, you're finding layers underneath. Imagine ancient history where you go under each brick, under each layer, like under the Parthenon, they found a smaller Parthenon. And then under that, I can guarantee you there's at least two more under there. Of little bits. Even on the microscopic level, there were things from even 100,000 years back. So with Bacon's Castle, it's going to be that on the micro versus the macro of history. But you get what I'm saying, layers upon layers.
Right.
It's a fad that's happened throughout history, and people self-farm this through history. Yeah.
So I'm assuming that the land that it's on that looks all currently like just farmland, was that area probably treed and they had to pull it down? Because I think that's more of how Virginia was. There was a lot of forest.
It was thick at one time. It's just like in Scotland with Glen's Castle, where they used to train warriors out in the Middle Ages, where it was surrounded by trees. It was that weird diamond-shaped castle with the points on the edge. You now see it out in the open. It's out in Scotland with farm and stuff nearby. Just like what happened with Bacon's Castle. But the same with Glan's and Bacon Castle, all the trees were cleared from around. It was thick, dense forest. It actually looked better the way it did before in both respects. But they deforested pretty much everything. That's why they had to look for an oak tree, like what your tour guide was saying about the beams. They couldn't find another one because they had chopped them all down.
Right.
And the ones that remained were protected.
So what we're talking about is a main beam that would run from, if you went into the basement, you could see this one main beam that went across the house to hold the weight and everything, and it was really big. that ended up having to be replaced. There are still some original pieces that are in there, but some parts of them, certain really structural important parts of it had to be replaced, and that beam was one of them. This was more recent times. That piece had to be replaced.
And the windows, they said, were not the right width, and they had to chop the beam in half and put it in. That's actually a bit of a more important information than you think. It might be boring by some people's standards, but it's actually quite interesting because they will have to keep doing this for centuries to come to maintain. Just like in your own home, what do you have to do? You have to do repairs. If you just let something sit, it's going to cave in. And no matter what it is, unless it's made of stone, like you see in antiquity, all that's left is the stone because nobody was there to maintain it. And so you have maintenance done constantly. That's why they need the donations and everything. But they're going to continue this forever. And I will say one point that is in his head and mine. Just like with your darling Thomas being the advisor to King Henry VIII, you have your Merlin to Arthur type of thing with wizards and court wizards and everything. The governors in the states, or I should say in the territories at the time, a couple of them did have something similar. Just like your feudal Japanese families had the Onmyaji, the children of Abe no Seimei, you also have your governors. Some of them exist now. And some of your prime ministers and stuff have some of these people that do astrology in such form. This was no different in the Revolutionary time. You had with Ben Franklin and them. They had that whole. It wasn't like that. It was very similar to like a planetary society type of thing. This is very similar, where certain people, if they knew they were important enough, would try to get some kind of advisor, or one would just kind of show up. The Sir Shitsalot there didn't have any of this. So, and somewhere he's objecting to being called Sir Shitsalot. But you want to talk about Professor Poopy Pants? That's this guy. Do we give him shit? No. Yes, pun intended, because he's a family member. I'm very, very far removed from these dipshits. So,
But the interesting thing was, again, when we talk about this time, the late 1600s, a little bit less than that, but in that time frame, that the Gardner family was already, let's just say, in position. It sounds like even at that time, prior to the Revolutionary War.
Oh, most definitely, they were in position because they planned it in the reverse direction. So from future to past. See, they knew exactly where to plant themselves and find their ancestry and tell them where to be. You see. So, and of course, Gardner's Island was chosen because of its position, latitude, and longitude. That is very important to know when you're time traveling, is latitude and longitude, and close within that proximity. That's why if you go east, or if you go west and further south, you have Montauk. That's why they chose it along that latitude line. See.
So I'm going to we're just going to deviate slightly, just so you can comment on what I'm about to say. It's really something that should come up in a whole nother show. But when we talk about, again, time travel, but then you have to talk about the statement that it's everywhere, all at once, all at one time, layers, onion layers. These lines going are onion layers of lines with history. One of them could be something that appears to be a past event. One of them could be a future event. One of them would be maybe what you would consider a current event. And then there's multitude of different versions of all of them, let's just say, right? Mm-hmm. So the interesting thing when we talk about these and we talk about these time travels, and one thing that I think maybe we should get into later is like when the Gardners were doing their time travel back, let's just say, because we jump timelines, it's hard to know what timeline is going to affect the future one, right?
Yeah, temporal clusters. You're dealing with hairs, you see. Like you saw in Loki with the different branches. Even though it's a large tree as the multiverse, you have little fine bits of bark that are hairs. Some are clusters, like what he would say, you just, in a lot of different timelines, you're just wearing a different shirt. That's kind of that way.
But they
Uh,
literally are close together.
Close, very like touching, like fibers.
So would they
Essentially.
have to go into multiple hair fibers and try to change things on multiple
Yes,
ones?
yes,
Because I
yes.
didn't know exactly.
The
And
time
you
time
could
core and the
jump.
gardeners, yes, yes,
And you could,
absolutely.
jump. So when we, let's say, when we say
And
we're
fuse.
constantly jumping,
Yes.
well, that's an interesting whole nother point that I was talking to Chris about not too long ago. But when you were jumping, I'm assuming you only have so far, you're in one of these clusters where you can jump. I'm assuming you can't jump 180 degrees in the opposite direction.
No, there's only so far you can take this. Now, could they go to a parallel universe? Well, I mean, an extreme one, even a divergent evolution one. Yes and no. Sometimes if some are caught in other areas, they are put back to their clusters as well. If you have somebody other than Time Core or somebody else or the Future Kind or any of them trying to patrol the lines, you see, and also the guardianship, all of them. They'll let people pass between them if they're good. Just like you saw your Guardian of Forever in your Star Trek Discovery, where he was making sure that Giorgio character was worthy of going back in time and not fucking everything up. Because of the temporal war, that's that same mentality. People that guard these timelines, think of it as kind of like a Heimdall complex or a Heimdall job, like guarding the Bifrost type of thing. And there was a group that did that for Asgard too, but very similar. Think cops. But also the NDTF is that way. You'll talk about that on your next GIC. I'm just saying they can go more into that. But multidimensional task force. But think cops that are for the multiverse or your multiversal federation you saw in your lower decks, kind of very similar, but with mixed with a guardianship. But anyway, but with this, if the gardeners had attempted to really fuck it up, it would have just torn holes in every which way from every parts of the multiverse, and the guardianship doesn't want this. They tolerate it. I think they tolerate it too much, in my opinion, but they tolerate it as long as it's within the hair cluster.
But the bottom line, the only reason somebody's sitting on a future timeline with technology to be able to go visit other ones in this cluster or whatever,
Mhm.
the only reason they would do it is, you had alluded to it, I pretty much thought this, that when some of these fibers get so close together, it seems like that they could meld into one.
That's their Mandela effect at work, yes.
And so obviously you maybe could get something that melds in that would potentially, somehow affect your way of life right now, and you may not want it.
Yes, they calculate, your time core calculates fusing the timelines together. Sometimes if it benefits them. Also from timelines that naturally touch branches of a tree, you'll get objects that switch places, and of course you jump timelines all the time. They recognize the physics of this and they try to go with a current. It's like a how can I put this? A weatherman trying to predict a storm front, or trying to predict some kind of weather event of some kind, or the way the wind blows, the rains are going to fall, something like this. They try to predict it. They don't always get it completely on the mark. You can have as many hundreds of eggheads as they have working on this. You can dictate all the numbers and calculate all the things you want. It cannot count for every single variant or variable. The multiverse will always, the house always wins. Let's just put it this way. Not even the guardianship, the house always wins. The tree, or the Yggdrasil tree always wins this. Nature always wins. This is extremely important to understand. Nature will make a comeback. They thought they could account for that too. No. You can, to an extent, predict the weather. Like he says, they don't know what they're doing anymore. They never did. It was more like an educated theory guess where they do it pretty well, but it's never going to be 100%. And that's where you get these fluctuations from.
Well, again, this is really something for a whole another conversation,
Oh, you will.
but I think since the Gardner name came up, it's always interesting to try to get people to understand these concepts that, people of the future also are looking at things of the past and worried. I think it's worry. It seems to be worry that, something could come close enough to them and with a Mandela effect could maybe change something that they didn't want changed. Although I would think some of them also maybe would see some timelines that they're happy about, that they would maybe a Mandela effect would make something even better.
Yes, and sometimes if you pull on a thread enough, you're going to unravel the tapestry. It's also like that show you saw many years ago, Timelines, or what it was called, I believe, where somebody's sister got uncreated, and the director of the cabal military or group or the corporate group went, close enough. That's sometimes the attitude that Time Corps gardeners all then take, close enough. Or like even in your Simpsons where he kept altering the timelines, killing the dinosaurs over and over again, and then he finds this timeline that it's close. So he sees his family, Marge, Bart, and Lisa. Everything seems fine, but they're eating everything with lizard tongues. He goes, close enough. So that's essentially their attitude. That's what Homer was reflecting in that scene, actually.
So we'll just close this off. So what's interesting is that this actually was somewhat recorded correctly in history. The story, which I always wonder now, is it correct? So not everything is false.
Not everything is false. People are under this mindset that you need to question all of history. Not everything is crap. It's just that you had crap shyster scam artists that actually were recorded correctly. Sometimes a cigar is a cigar, just a cigar, just like Sigmund Freud would say. Even though he had a lot of things wrong, we're not going to that. I'm just saying that there are things that are really far off, like your Tartarian Empire information is not being told correctly. But then you have history like Bacon's Castle that is. I mean, of course, you're not going to get every single day to day like you would now.
Oh, no,
because you
You
don't have
can't.
any recorded.
But a very broad brushstroke was correct.
A broad brushstroke was actually very correct. Yes.
Very interesting. Well, thank you for your comments. Any last words?
Not at this time, but I will say one thing again. There's some of your history that, again, is very far off the mark that you're not being told, especially with some of your religious history. And then you have some, like Sir Shitzalat, that actually did happen exactly as I just described, and the history just described. Dead face down in a swamp, shitting himself. That's exactly what took place, and it couldn't have happened to a better guy. Again, that guy in your family again that you go, ugh. That's essentially how we tolerate him, like in that Lord of the Hillbilly video that he was showing you that time. It's like, we don't talk to Gollum, but he's family, so we put up with him, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. That's how basically that guy's Gollum, pretty much. So that's exactly how we tolerate it. That is where I will leave it. So thank you, everybody. All right. So, yeah. Well, that's true. It felt right to me what was being said, like some of the day-to-day that they happen to find records, but not everybody keeps records. And I said this to my father once because he was finding newspapers from Camp Grant. He studies Camp Grant history, Camp Grant, Illinois history. And he finds all these newspaper articles and stuff from that time, or whole newspapers. He goes, why didn't people keep these? I said, you? So last I looked, you have a mound of these newspapers you throw in the recycle bin every week. Good point. Nobody keeps any of this crap. If you happen to find something, it's rare that has a date on it or a timestamp on it somewhere. And it's because they compiled a bunch of those. They kind of piece together the history. It's like with the pilgrims you had and the Mayflower, with the buckle hat and everything. They found, and I came to find this out, they found one guy with the buckle hat on. Now everybody's wearing the buckle hats. So it's the style at the time. One guy they found with it. In a basement in a hole somewhere, they find one guy with the buckle hat on, and that's the only thing that had it. Like, oh, this must have been the style. No, it was that one guy. So some things can get skewed. 1492, that's what I was trying. Oh, not 1492, but when the Pilgrims came over later on in, I believe it was in the 6th, later. Oh, actually, yeah, it was post Columbus. But anyway, I know my brain's starting to fart here, but just know puritanical time frame, that would be the 1600s or so, just prior to Salem or up through Salem. The buckle hat thing, and also the whole story with the Mayflower and Squanto and all that, the Thanksgiving story, The only reason the Native Americans showed up to that wasn't some big, great, kumbaya. They were making sure Whitey didn't kill them that night. So that's actually factual. That's where that's skewed. Did certain things happen? Yes and no. They traded back and forth, and they made this big celebration about it. That's where some historical flubs happen, right there, like with the Thanksgiving story. The thing with Bacon's Castle, they hit it more on the mark. So you're not going to get everything, but you got a lot of something. So, Joanna, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Hope you guys thought this was interesting. We sure did. And, we look forward to sharing more of these as we come across things.
And Isaac basically said, "You're thinking Plymouth Rock, dumbass, the buckle hat thing." Yeah, okay. So, thank you. Now, this is where I will close the circle within true benevolence and no conflicting agendas of this moment in time. So, thank you, everybody. Bye-bye now.
Oh, I wanted to say that this problem I had with my stomach, unbelievable twisting pain, like glass was going through my system, and metal shards and ringing out like a wash right in the intestines. I felt that before with certain poisons in the food. Had issues, but paranormal activity will latch onto a weakness. Empathic transference from Nathaniel Bacon, the way he died. Just like my father went to where Scott of the Antarctic died, and he felt extreme cold, because that's how he died. So, and he was a ghost, like what Isaac said. Empathic transference is really ugly. There was even a man that went on into a hotel, attempted to throw a little girl off of a hotel, because there was a man that was a murder-suicide there where he jumped off with her. He goes, "Oh, I'm going to get a divorce," all from his wife and everything, fought with her. And then that's what happened. It was empathic transference. Dangerous thing. This is why I get ghosts out of places. So I can talk more about that on a different show, but this is why. I thought it was me. I was like, what did I do? What did I eat? I have an allergy to pineapple and corn, but that's it. So, and there wasn't a lot of it that would have done that. That's paranormal when that shit happens. Literally in this case. So, where a guy was face down in a swamp and shit himself to death from dysentery and probably barfed himself to death. Bad way to go. And that's what it felt like I was dying. And he did from dysentery. He died of typhoid and dysentery. I can't find out. That's a very painful death. But Isaac called him Sir Shits a lot. So, why I had such pain. Paranormal type things are nothing to fuck with. And I get kicked in the gonads every now and again, too. I didn't know about the way he died when I got there. That's what solidifies it. I thought it was my food allergies. I'm like, I didn't do anything. It was when I crossed the threshold into Bacon Castle. Right as I crossed the sign. Boom! And also, he was never there, but he's named for it. So he didn't die there, just like Scott of the Antarctic didn't die in his own house. The other house had his name on it in England. So, where my father went and felt freezing cold as he crossed the threshold, I crossed the threshold into Bacon Castle's territory, not into the house, past the sign. The territory where his land pirates, his marauders, went in there and did their thing. They're his insurrection or his revolution or rebellion. So, yeah, important distinction, but it still counts. Oh, the way you get both those medical conditions is through unsanitary food and water. Undercooked meat, things of that nature. And, yeah, you're not escaping a disease. No matter how rich you are or how many resources you have, which he had very little, but basically I saw him fall face down in a swamp, screaming, hitting his stomach, which is what I was doing when we were there. And then barfed all over himself, shit himself, and fell over. And that's exactly what you do. You get dehydrated, you shit and puke until you die. With typhoid and with dysentery. You get them both. One this way, the other one the other way. And fever. Like you heard of typhoid fever, like on the Oregon Trail, people died of typhoid fever. That. So, like if anybody ever played the game Oregon Trail on the computer with the old floppy disks, they always said, when you're halfway through, oh, your people died of typhoid fever, you're gone. Like in that old Nintendo game with the Friday the 13th, oh, all your friends are dead. The end. And the game ends suddenly. That always reminds me of that. One of the most worthless games of all time was the Friday the 13th one. That's my nerd moment there. So I surmised, the reason I can channel Isaac so easily and hear him so he says that we're related. We're on my mother's side, so yeah. But also with Nathaniel Bacon, we're related. So that hit more easily. That's how that got through my defenses. I normally don't get hit with empathic transference anymore, unless there's already a condition. I've had, UTIs and irritable bowel syndrome, IBSs for a while. And of course, things attack the irritated and damaged spots first. But also with Thomas, aka Shakespeare, that's also a relation. So Dryden, the Tuatha De Danann and or Launielosian that we've spoken about on the lifting in the past and GIC, were related. So from the olden time in Ireland that Tolkien wrote about in Lord of the Rings, between the Tuatha De Danann and the Fomorians, or the elves and Sauron, and the humans got caught in the middle. I'm thinking that's a GIC subject at some point. The frequencies can hit easier if you have a genetic relation. It also applies to viruses and DNA, lineage curse. It can fall under that loosely, but the others mainly behavior. But and also lineage curse, meaning like diseases or receptivity, sensitivities, things of that nature. And also being allergic to certain foods, plants, all of it, like what Aubrey and I were talking about in conspiracy sector. So things of that nature. So, and the GMOs and all that other stuff didn't help either. It just made me more susceptible. Being related to Nathaniel Bacon, also more susceptible. Of course, Isaac won't let this go. That's now he's saying he pissed himself to death. I had a hard time peeing this morning too. So, I had to pee continuously. So that's sometimes nothing new if you have a condition like a UTI, and I've gotten rid of one recently. But again, it being so recent, that energy attached very easily. So, yeah. So he can't let it go. Oh, he pissed shit and puked himself to death. I don't know why he's not letting it go. He's poking at this guy repeatedly for a reason. I've yet to figure out what the injustice was in this, other than what happened to the slaves, the Native Americans he killed. Unless he felt it was an injustice, an unfinished business. And my mother said there was a ghost that passed over the other side that was a bigot here. She continued to be that way in death, just like as in life. Asshole in life, asshole in death. And he maybe thought he had injustice against him and lies against him and all this other stuff, and that generates one too. And I feel that's correct. Oh, also, I noticed I was drained from paranormal events. It's basically there was a draining issue. That's common, weak feeling, and I was loaded up on caffeine. And I was like ugh. Afterwards. They like to drain batteries. They thankfully didn't do that. Or ghosts like to drain batteries. Didn't happen with the phone. But the computer, I observed this as we were recording this episode. The battery was attempting to drain with the computer with it plugged in. I noticed this, and that's when Nathaniel Bacon was trying to make contact. That's why Isaac was buffering him. The computer battery was draining as it was plugged in and then refilling. This happened to that very computer in Prescott Valley, where I had a vagrant ghost come in and drain the battery in full, but it was plugged in. It caused it to overheat, so it's always been kind of ghost warped. And ghost warping means essentially equipment affected by ghost and paranormal activity. So, yeah. That is essentially what I call, that's my defined word. So, anyway, pass that one around. Go ahead and use it. But, anyway, this is essentially what I ran into. Saw the battery drain again. It's plugged into the wall. All of a sudden, I'm seeing it's trying to charge it as it's draining. I'm observing this while we're recording that in there. I didn't say anything. I probably should have at the time. But, yeah, I'm just watching that. If you see me looking down, that's what I'm looking at. So, anyway, it is 10:07 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Saturday, March 29th, 2025. Thank you. Yep, we had it's historically confirmed he died of typhoid, dysentery, and possible, we can't confirm the urinary tract thing, but that's what it is, picked up on the UTI, IBS, UTI, irritable bowel syndrome, and typhus or typhoid. So we were able to confirm it. So yeah, and I was able to energetically confirm that's what happened yesterday. So I just wanted to report on that it was absolutely 110% confirmed that's what that was when I crossed the threshold into Bacon's Castle, into the territory past the sign, a little bit past the sign. That's what my father went through when he went to the house of Scott of the Antarctic, because that's how Scott died, the explorer. So look that up. Okay, the name I was trying to come up with was Robert Falcon Scott, British Royal Navy officer and explorer, born June 6, 1868, Plymouth, United Kingdom. Died, and I even came up with the name Plymouth, like Plymouth Rock. So somebody was also giving me a clue. He died March 29th, 1912, Ross Ice Shelf, Antarctica. So that's what I came up with. Okay, my mother asked whether the historical figure Ethan Allen was related to Arthur Allen from Bacon Castle, and this was actually very interesting. Yes, the Revolutionary War figure Ethan Allen was the brother of Ira Allen and the father of Fanny Allen, but there's no direct evidence to suggest a relationship between Ethan Allen and Arthur Allen, other than the fact that they shared the same last name. More details: Ethan Allen, from 1738 to 1789. He was a prominent figure in the Revolution, known for his role in the capture of Fort Ticonderoga, and one of the founders of Vermont. Ira Allen, 1741 to 1814. Ethan Allen's brother. Ira also played a role in the founding of Vermont. Fanny Allen, Ethan Allen's daughter. Arthur Allen, 1652 to 1705. Arthur Allen II, a merchant who lived in Virginia, was born around 1652. Bacon's Castle. So, it is 10:25 a.m. Oh, sorry for the quickness of this. I needed to get this in before we did a GIC this morning. So, that's the end of this now. So, it is 10:25 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Sunday, March 30th, 2025. Thank you.